Chapter 1, Lesson 4, Evolution and Classification. After this lesson, you'll be able to explain the relationship between these two things. How are evolution and classification related? Charles Darwin is credited for deriving the theory of evolution. And evolution is the process of change over time. Darwin based his theory on several observations that he made. These are: there is variation or differences within a species. Some variations are favorable, while others are not. And not all offspring produced by every species can survive. There is not enough resources. In 1859, Charles Darwin published a book about how species could change over time, and the process of species changing over time is called natural selection. Natural selection is the process where species that are more able to survive in their surroundings are the species that will survive and reproduce. Species become more able to survive through a process called adapting. So if a species adapts, and it is a favorable adaptation, they are going to win out over the ones that have not adapted. Those adaptations then would be passed on to their offspring. A key concept, very important in this section: species with similar evolutionary histories are classified more closely together. So the closer they are classified, the more history they have that is common. In Linnaeus' time, scientists thought that species never changed. But today, scientists have changed how they classify species. The current system of classification considers the history of the species. Two things that similar organisms share are, number one, a common ancestor, and number two, evolutionary history. Scientists look at the structure of an organism, which means like the bones or the skeleton, and the chemical makeup of the cells in an organism, or its DNA. This means that as species adapt, they may change how they look or how they behave. Scientists look more closely at species characteristics to identify things that they have in common, and they link species to ancestors they may have shared before the adaptation. In other words, they go back before the species adapted and look at the bone structure or the makeup in the cells, and they can determine if they came from the same origin, the same species. The more the two groups that they're analyzing are the same, then the scientists infer that their ancestry is more recent. So if the bone structure of one species is very close to the bone structure of another species, that means that that adaptation probably happened fairly recently. Branching tree diagrams. Look at Figure 1 on page 27. This is an example of a branching tree diagram, and it shows the evolutionary relationship among organisms and the order in which specific characteristics may have come about. So a branching tree diagram shows evolutionary relationships and the order that they happened. Branching tree diagrams begins at the base with the common ancestor of every other organism in the diagram. They share what's called a derived characteristic. Shared derived characteristics are traits that evolved in the ancestor of a group of organisms and is present in every one of the descendants from that ancestor. So anything that occurred after that would have that shared derived characteristic. If you look at Finding New Species on page 28 and 29, you'll notice that all three organisms are animals, so they share the same domain and kingdom. We know that. And they also live in the same area. Shared derived characteristics would show a common evolutionary ancestor among these three animals. DNA evidence would give you proof that the unknown animal is a new species. So they can look at the bone structure, skeletal structure, and see that they have common traits. But in order to find out if it is a new species, they collect DNA evidence. Actually, the new species in the picture is a flying lemur. Look again at the three animals. Can you determine which two are more closely related? You would look and see how much they look alike. Which two are least related? As the number of organisms between the two ancestors of two organisms increases, the branches between the two would be farther apart. Determining evolutionary relationships. Scientists can determine evolutionary relationships by comparing the structure of organisms or by using information about the chemical makeup of the organism's cells. This process is called convergent evolution. The word convergent means to flow together or to come together from different places. And in this case, it means coming together in a species from different places. When organisms' body structures look similar, it could be because the two organisms perform similar functions, eat similar foods, or live in similar environments. So unrelated organisms can evolve or change over time and have similar characteristics. Lastly, over time, new information can result in reclassification of a species. Scientists compared the nucleic acids from the cells of skunks and weasels, which were classified together, and found that they're very different. This resulted in skunks being classified in a separate family. So changes do still occur because we find new information, new ways of getting to that information.